You either live by the gun or you die by the sword.
Blessed be thou who listens to the good, the bad, and the weird. And blessed be thou who drinks that sweet, sweet Kool-Aid. For only through corn are we saved, so saith he who walks behind the rows. Holy Herbie, may you bless this flat land with a winning season. May you crush anyone who defiles the corn with fire and brimstone. For Nebraska, honestly, it's not for everyone. Praise be unto he who walks behind the rows. Amen.
Amen.
If you haven't guessed it, we're doing Children of the Corn. We're going back to the Midwest.
We're going back to the Midwest. We're also starting... We've reached full summer vibes here in the Midwest. It's nice and hot and humid. And what better time to watch a horror movie than summertime?
Yes. And also back to my alma mater of
Now
Nebraska.
that might be Missouri Southern, or I don't know if that belongs there or not.
I don't know. I'm sure I've offended everyone I know in Nebraska.
We apologize to Nebraska in general, but also, I lived in Kansas for a good long while. I'm there with you.
Yeah.
We're corn people together.
Transplant corn person myself.
I understand. But Children of the Corn.
Yes.
First off, we picked this movie because we want to do a horror movie because it's summertime and that's when you watch horror movies.
And not only that, we love horror films and we just don't want only October to be the month that we get to express our love for this.
Very true. And also, I don't know, summertime horror movies is I don't know, that's peak watching right there. Mm-hmm. But also, Children of the Corn has managed to become a classic horror movie, which is funny because I don't think a lot of people have legitimately watched it, or if they have, they watched it the one time when it first came out and then haven't touched it since.
Or they're like me who I had first lived in Nebraska in 7th, 8th, and 9th grade. Mm-hmm. And then, where'd you move from? Nebraska. Oh, you're a Children of the Corn. I'm like, I have no clue what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And so never watched it until I was in college.
Yeah, this movie, despite arguably being a bad horror movie, has a massive cult following. In pretty much every list of classic horrors that I see pop up, this movie manages to squeeze its way on the list, which is interesting because while I like this movie, but we've established I have terrible taste in movies.
Yeah.
My husband likes this movie.
I honestly am surprised Brian likes this.
Me too. I was really waiting for him at any point to be I can't take it anymore. I'm going to the other room. Mm-hmm. Goodbye. No, he legitimately likes this movie.
Oh, yeah. Because, I've pitched a couple, low ideal horror films to him before.
Yeah.
And he's just nah, I don't feel it. And, this one, it's okay, there's something about this film that's endearing. Maybe it's just us because we've spent a fair amount of time in the Midwest.
It's definitely got a rural horror charm about it. Mm-hmm. It's a cute horror movie, if that makes sense. Not in the intentionally cute, but in you tried.
Yeah, it's what's the term? It's kind of homely.
It is a little homely.
Yeah. And today, before we get into it, what are we drinking, Chris?
Well, today we have grape Kool-Aid. Do you want to explain why Kool-Aid for those non-Nebraskan folk?
So, Kool-Aid is from Hastings, Nebraska.
Yes, it is.
And that's exactly why we chose this. And I wanted the orange, but they didn't have it, so we took the Jim Jones route and...
We got grape.
Got grape Kool-Aid.
We got grape Kool-Aid.
Although
Jim Jones did not actually have Kool-Aid. It was a different brand.
He had a mixture. He used Flavor Aid mainly, but they did have some Kool-Aid in it.
Yeah. Well, you gotta make do with what you got here in the Midwest.
Yep. Cheers.
Cheers. We also have, mostly for looking at, because they're real old, I found some candy corns in the back of my pantry.
the most divisive Halloween candy.
I wouldn't even call it divisive. I feel like if you are like us and actually like candy corn, you're just shunned into silence.
Yeah.
So while you and I legitimately do like candy corn, nobody else likes it, and thus why I still have a almost full bag left over from Halloween last year.
Yeah.
I do buy new
Candy corn.
new candy corn every year, I promise. So like if you get something from me this upcoming Halloween or Thanksgiving and it has candy corn, I guarantee it is fresh candy corn. I would just have to sit here in silence and eat my sad old candy corn by myself.
I'll take it from you. So, yeah, part of the reason we chose also Children of the Corn is it was a summer release.
It was. It's a good summer release.
We had to talk about different kinds of horror films that come out, especially like the generic October ones.
There's always the generic October.
And we didn't like... Generally, the ones at the very beginning of the year are horrible. As we've seen in my track record of trying to watch every new horror film in theaters this year.
Yeah, the ones at the beginning of the year are kind of the throwaway ones. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, I would even argue that sometimes the ones that come out around Halloween tend to be really pandery. Yeah. Like, they just kind of feel like, I made a Halloween movie for Halloween.
We made it PG-13 so that way kids can get in.
Yeah, because now it's a scary movie. The summer ones tend to feel the most genuine to the horror. The horror fans for the most part,
and even a horror adjacent. Because I still don't really consider Jaws a horror movie.
No, but it's definitely got nightmare fuel in it for those of you who are not into sharks. Yeah,
and on top of that, that was also the first summer blockbuster movie. Yeah, and I don't know, it just. There's something special about staying up late on a summer night because also when we were kids, you're done with school, so you're up late, and that's when the really good horror movies come along. Like that's how I got exposed to some other horror films back when sci-fi was really good. So
the Sci-Fi Channel, how I miss you.
Miss the good version.
Yeah, yeah. The other reason why we picked this one is this is a Stephen King one, which is. Again, we've talked about this, and we'll get into this more. This isn't a great movie. No. However, it still manages to be on the list of, like, top Stephen King films for reasons that I'm really not entirely sure on. Granted, he has other films that are much higher on that list. This one still manages to be on there, though. Which, I don't know if it belongs.
Yeah, and, I mean, I won't say I'm the biggest Stephen King's fan, just because I've seen a fair amount of the movie adaptations. Yeah. There's so many of them.
There's so many, and on, you know.
Well, and I think on top of that, a lot of the ones that we see are based off, like, a full novel. And so, of course, you're going to have the divisive fans who are like, oh, the book was better, or the people are like, the movie was better, that kind of stuff. Oh, yeah. I actually learned... through an interview from last podcast on the left when they interviewed the guy who did Dr. Sleep, who directed that. And they were asking, like, how hands-on is he? Because they knew historically he doesn't really care for, or he's very open about not caring for The Shining or horror movies he doesn't like. And the director said that Stephen King's hands-off and he treats them as separate entities. Yeah. Because he has an understanding that they're not going to be the same.
And I think this film... really did help solidify that with him, because his short story that this is based off of, it does differ quite a bit from the final product we see on film. At least enough that as an author I could see you being not crazy about what they've done to your work. Well, it has the same spirit, I think, but there's enough differences, and we can go over those later. I know he wasn't super crazy about those, but I think the director and the screenwriter of this of the 1984 Children of the Corn, explained it to him best, like, this isn't in someone's head, this isn't all happening internally, this is an external medium.
Well, and I mean, that part of that too was, and I think we glazed over a little bit, Stephen King actually wrote an original screenplay for it. Yeah. And Terrence Kirby, the producer, I believe, mentioned that the screenplay was more like a novel, and they spent, like, 30-45 minutes of the movie arguing in a car.
Yeah, like the first 30 minutes was just building what we consider the two main characters. Yeah.
And honestly, I know there's some movies where they take place in a single room. Or,
oh yeah, like there's definitely always ones that break the mold.
Mm-hmm. But they're special movies. They're not. They're
special because they're breaking the mold. If every movie did that, it'd be boring.
Oh yeah,
it'd be real weird.
And so, kind of just want to get into it a little bit. Even though they say the movie was the movie takes place in Gatlin, Nebraska.
That's what they say. It
actually takes place in an area that I'm a little more accustomed to.
Oh, yeah?
Sioux City, Iowa.
I have been to Sioux City myself many a times.
I have only been to South Sioux City, Iowa for a project for college.
Fair.
Yeah, that's the only time I've been in that. And I have another project with work that's based in that area. But yeah, so they originally had planned to film like later in the year, August, September, and they didn't realize that corn.
Yeah, they didn't think that one through, did they?
Died quicker the further east you go.
Yeah, that nope, didn't work out.
So a lot of what you actually see in the movie is kind of interesting because it kind of cuts between like dead and dying corn to green corn to spray painted green corn.
And I will say, if you're not really accustomed to looking at corn a lot, I don't think anyone's really going to notice unless you're looking for it.
And it's such a mass that you're not really trying to pay attention to anyways.
No.
It's like looking at a dark screen in a horror film.
Yeah.
And trying to find like the little thing coming out of the darknand or something. It's just, it's more of a wash in a background.
Definitely. I will say though that if you are super familiar with the cornfields, and, you know, just a little bit more accustomed to real life cycles of corn and seasons, it's almost comical watching the film, because you do they do obviously try to put this film to be in the later fall, like all the leaves are missing the trees are all missing leaves, and they show all the corn in the field is, for the most part, pretty dry and crusty, but sometimes it's green, sometimes it's not.
Yeah.
And the way most of the corn is filmed feels off. If you've been around a lot of corn a lot. If you're not, though, I don't think anyone notices.
And I think that's kind of great too, because
it does make it uneasy, though.
Yeah, it makes it uneasy. I personally, I'm not a fan of cornfields. One, I didn't experience corn the first time I went to Nebraska. I actually experienced it in France. We were going on a hike, following the path of Napoleon.
Yep.
And I was in I was in what America would consider elementary school.
Oh, so you're prime height for corn terror.
Yeah. So okay. America. It would have been 6th grade. So it was middle school for me. And we were walking along, and that was the first time because it was a narrow little path in the French countryside, and just nothing around me. And it plays into some other fears. Like I'm still afraid of the dark, and I'm afraid of the ocean and stuff. And I've come to realize it's not necessarily I'm afraid of those specific things. I'm afraid of not being able to see too far from me. Yeah. And so that's the biggest thing with corn for me. And of course, you tell people that, and they equate it to, oh, you watch Children of the Corn too young. And I think that plays into a lot of people too, but
also I think at the same time, especially if you grew up in a corn heavy area, it's not hard for, it's not uncommon for at least one older person to tell you to not play in the cornfield, because it is easy to get lost in there. Yeah. And there's lots of horror stories, and some of them true horror stories about people getting lost or kidnapped or found long time afterwards in corn. Yeah. My current favorite one is, you remember the clown craze.
Yes. I saw a couple videos out of like Nebraska, people just hiding in the corn on the highway.
Oh, it's so creepy. But if you need a good scare, like 2 a.m., plenty of videos of scary things in corn, and it's mostly just people having a laugh. But, 2 a.m., it's very spooky.
And on top of that, I know I joked earlier that in the sermon that Nebraska is flat. This part of Nebraska where it's set is... It's flat. Pretty flat, yeah. The closest city in the short story it mentions is Grand Island. Yeah. Where Grand Island is so flat. I have a group of buddies from there The only hill they have it's a hill that covers up the refuse from a major tornado that destroyed a good chunk of the city.
Yeah, that speaks to my Kansas soul right there.
Yeah.
I feel that. One of our national landmarks is a hill.
Yeah,
so.
that same thing with Grand Island. But that's just the further west you go, the flatter it gets.
Oh yeah.
More towards Iowa, you're fine. There's more hills and
there's something to look at out the car window, which kind of gets us to the beginning of this movie, because I kind of do wish that they'd left at least more of the bickering in at the beginning, because this movie starts off with our two main characters.
Nope.
Oh, it doesn't.
It starts off with the massacre of the adults.
It does start off with the massacre of the adults.
And
easily forgettable, sadly.
No, I don't think so, because honestly, it really sets the tone for the movie, because otherwise we wouldn't know. Because in the story, it starts off with them bickering. Yeah. This one starts off, okay, these children massacred this entire town.
Yeah.
There is one key thing they left out, the Blue Man.
The Blue Man,
He was on a bunch of movie posters and promotional material.
Yep.
And then he was cut from the movie. But so, not only that, this town that they filmed it in, Sioux City, and some small towns around it, was really open to everyone coming in.
I mean, it is kind of fun, the idea of having a horror film filmed in your town.
And I like it too, because if you go into it not knowing it's a horror film, which it's Stephen King, so of course you know it's a horror film.
How do you look at the poster of literally any of them and go, not a horror film?
Yeah. But it starts off and it feels very Americana.
Oh, yeah.
Like a Sunday afternoon, they just got off church, they're going to...
Oh, gosh, yeah. And, I don't know, it kind of plays off of, like, the old TV show vibes, too. Like Andy Griffith's show kind of vibes, where, you know, everyone in the town has a routine, they all do things together.
And then it immediately twists it on its head. Yeah.
And it does set a good tone for the movie. I will give it that.
Because now we know what's waiting in Gatlin, Nebraska. Yeah. And so after the and the other thing too is, instead of, like, in a lot of modern horror films I'd say we'd see, it starts off with some super violent, gory scene. Yeah. And this one doesn't. They took the Hitchcock approach and more implied the violence than anything. Which does help a lot for this film, not just in storytelling, because honestly, I think for most movies, less is more for gore and horror. But it also helped a lot because this movie hasn't aged super great visually, mostly because the budget wasn't super high for it. Yeah, it was a low budget movie, and back to it being a schlocky horror film, that's kind of what they were going for. They wanted it to be a drive-in movie theater movie. And it gives that feel really nicely, so that way you know what you're getting into at the beginning. You know that, this is definitely a horror movie, it's definitely a Stephen King film, but at the same time, you're not looking for any crazy special effects at this point. You kind of know what you're in for at this point in the show, which I kind of like. I kind of miss that. I don't think horror movies do it as much anymore, because it's easier to do with CGI. Yeah, and I'd say it's more the lower budget indie horror films that go for that kind of effect, or some high-end art horror films, I'd say, because they're more intentional of what they're showing. And I think a lot of those are also taking inspiration from these older movies and some of the older classic B movies. And you can kind of feel where that line is and how the director tiptoed around the budget line, and it works. Yeah. I think if they had shown more, it would have aged even faster. Yeah, and special effects wise, it would have aged even faster, and we'll get into that towards the end of the movie. Oh, yes. So, after the town is massacred... Everybody did. Yeah, we're introduced to our two main characters, Bert and Vicky. Oh, Bert and Vicky. Bert and Vicky are, in a way, the two classic horror movie candidates. We got our beautiful blonde, who, if given a chance, I think Vicky's character could have been more. Yeah. She's just not given a whole lot to work with. And honestly, in this one, neither of them are. No, they're very puppet-esque. Like, and I think that's kind of the great thing about it, too, because we know that they're city folk.
Yeah.
And they're trapped in the middle or they're lost in the middle of Nebraska. Now, this is all before GPS, cell phones.
They've got a map, and they're kind of hoping for the best.
Yeah.
I will say that this part of the movie, especially as a kid who grew up being the one in the back seat holding the map and trying to help navigate family road trips, this fear of being lost and getting stuck somewhere, either spooky or just lost in a field and you're out of gas, I mean, that does play. I don't think more recent generations are going to fully understand that fear of like, well, this is the town we have to stop in. I don't have any more gas. No, I can't call anyone.
Cameras everywhere. I'll add to that a little bit. Imagine that in a completely different country and you don't know the language.
I have actually been there.
Yeah.
Because we were going up north in Italy and no one told us that they didn't speak Italian there. They spoke German. None of us spoke any German.
If it's close to Austria, they don't like you calling it German.
That's the problem, though. We, got on the train. We were still in the Italian border, and we're like, oh, no. So we got by with some Spanish and called it good.
Hey, that's the great thing about over there, is if you know a little bit of another language, there's bound to be someone who knows.
We were lucky that there weren't killer children in this town.
Yes.
And that it was a beautiful tourist little town in the Alps, and we could point and grunt to things we wanted, like the Americans we were.
Side note, before we go on, Linda Hamilton plays Vicky, and she went on to do Terminator shortly after this.
Which is actually kind of funny, because I think this one and then the next Stephen King film that got made, both movies ended up with people who went on to play in Terminator movies.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Well, anywho, they're sitting there arguing in the car, just getting pissed off.
I would have liked a little more argument, because they did feel a little flat. Because we didn't get a lot of time with them.
We did get a little bit more time before they're arguing. They are lovey-dovey in a hotel.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. They're both terrible at time management, and what that turned into.
Yeah, basically.
But, yeah, I kind of wish we had gotten... I kind of wish we'd gotten rid of the lovey-dovey scene and, replaced it with more road trip scene.
Yeah.
Their fear of being lost in this small town, or potentially in the middle of nowhere with no one nearby.
Yeah.
I think back then that scene made sense and everyone could understand that anxiety. I don't think it's going to have the same impact nowadays and even in the future. So I kind of would have liked more arguing in the car scene as opposed to cute lovey scene.
Yeah.
I don't care if they're in love.
Yeah.
I want them to be sad and frustrated.
Yeah. And I think part of that is where we differ a little bit. I think the lovey scene gives it a little bit more depth than I think you're giving it credit for, because we know they love each other, but we also know that they're at the breaking point.
Yeah.
In the original story, they're just arguing, they're just straight up lost. And because it's internalized a lot more, the husband's thinking of, hey, we're trying to fix our marriage, but this isn't going to work.
Yeah.
And we don't get that in the movie.
No, yeah. And I guess it is going to be kind of a weird balancing act that, I don't know, maybe we'll see with another remake that will eventually come out, no doubt.
Maybe. But yeah, while they're arguing in the car, though, there's a preacher that comes on.
And for those of you who have driven through the Midwest, this will ring true to you. The radio only seems to have, well, I think to them it only has the one station, but in the Midwest there's only really two stations. There's country and there's church. And them's your options a lot of the time. And
us here in the Bible Belt, I recently stumbled upon the more extreme side of the religious radio programs.
Oh boy, you can get real deep in there.
Well, I mean, I only started listening to them just because I was getting ready to go over, I think, to Eric and Philip's house again, and while I was turning on the radio, I was just waiting for my phone to connect, like I normally do.
Yeah, because you don't listen to the radio here.
No, and I don't know where this is coming from, but and this is the only reason I've stuck with it is because I hear weird little things like this. I shit you not, this, you've heard this story, but for people who don't know, I shit you not, this is word for word what I heard. There's only one thing in the world, and it kills almost every germ. And I'm sitting there thinking, okay, it's going to be the Holy Spirit, Jesus, whatever.
Lysol.
I mean, close. Ivory soap.
Ivory soap.
Can I get an amen?
Amen. God bless Ivory soap.
God, I like, honestly, I forget I'm in the Bible Belt sometimes because we're at the very like tip of the Bible Belt.
Well, and in the region of Arkansas that we're in is arguably less Arkansas than the rest of it.
Mm-hmm. I don't reckon.
I don't reckon that. And yeah, I will say that the preacher that they get is definitely not, I would say, the average preacher sermon. However, they do exist. They are entertaining to tune into. There's lots of people who can elaborate more on that if you wish. A lot of people who make songs out of them because they are very, I don't know, theatrical, I guess, in their presentations sometimes.
Yeah.
But, you know, I also grew up with someone in the family who, like, that was how she managed to do church on Sundays. She couldn't leave her house. And so, like, yeah, is it maybe the best way? But it was her only connection. However, in the movie, it's kind of portrayed as like that is the one and only radio station.
Yeah.
Which, granted, I've also driven through areas where like radio reception is not great.
Nope.
But you usually get at least 2 different church sermons you can pick from.
Yeah.
This one, there's just the one, and they're not even portraying it as like you know, we're out in the middle of nowhere. It's definitely like they're portraying it from the city folk mindset of like, oh, this is creepy. There's only one radio station. Whereas I think if you're used to it down here, it's like, oh, you found the one radio station.
Well, and they also just don't want to deal with it because it's just
fair.
more angry yelling.
Yeah.
But then you hear like that little bit and the defiler of corn.
Yeah, there's a couple of good nuggets in there.
And then the husband is like, what the hell was that?
Yeah, time to turn that off. And I don't know, work on our relationship and, I don't know, our Boy Scout skills or something.
And, I mean, while he's not paying attention to the road, because he's arguing, he hits the kid.
Yeah, which, arguably, this is probably the most, like, I don't know, like, the rest of the movie has a spook factor. This is the one spot where your, like, whole being just kind of goes, oh no.
Yeah.
Because we know that this kid was running from someone.
Right, because there is a cut at some point where
this kid's seen talking to our other 2 main kids.
Yeah.
And he's like, I'm gonna run for it. I'm gonna do it. And so we see him running off into the cornfield. And then we also I think we get a hint that someone or something is chasing him. I think at this point in the movie, they're attempting to make it all someone's. There's not a supernatural thing just yet.
Yeah, and
so we're not, like, as an audience, we would like to think that this kid was dead pre-car hit, but we can't confirm that.
We can't confirm it, / he also died standing, which is
that'd be
weird thing, because we quickly find out that when Bert picks up the kid, he's like, I didn't do this. If I did hit him, someone stabbed him first.
Yeah. And
so now we're kind of in this awkward situation again. A normal environment, normal situation is flipped around because now, they've accidentally killed a kid.
Yeah.
And so now we're starting to get into that more level of uneasiness.
Yeah, like, they were already panicking beforehand. Now the panic is through the roof.
Yeah. And so they're trying to figure out where to go, and they just keep getting drawn to Gatlin. Which
is funny, because the town that is presented as, like, the safe option. What was that town's name? Why did I not write that down?
I don't know.
But anyway, that town in a different Stephen King novel is also presented as, like, the safe town. Okay. So, like, if you're one of those people who like to think that all the Stephen King stuff is in the same universe, there you go. That town, nice, normal, possibly not ridden with demons. Yeah. Gatlin, couple demons.
Yeah. Before we get ahead of that, I do want to mention one thing. Linda Hamilton's reaction in that scene is genuine, because they had the director Fritz Kirsch.
Sure. That guy.
It might be Kirsch.
Maybe.
But anywho, he was convincing her that the kid wasn't under there and that he had, due to child laws, they couldn't keep him on that 100-degree asphalt. They couldn't keep him covered up.
It's too toasty.
And so when the kid pops up, she actually freaks out, which is great.
Yeah.
I love in movies when they do that little stuff to screw with the actors.
Yeah, you do get a really good reaction from it. And the other part that I like is, on their way to getting stuck into Gatlin, we get the one adult who, up until recently, was not killed.
Yeah.
The gas station guy.
Kind of the gatekeeper to deter traffic.
Yeah. And I kind of liked him as a character because he wasn't part of the first massacre. It shows that there was deliberate thought put into all this, as opposed to like letting you think that, oh, they just killed everyone. No, they specifically killed everyone, and then they left this guy on purpose. Yeah,
because he's directly outside of town.
Yeah, so technically not in town.
Yeah.
But also he was there to try and get people to not go to Gatlin, because you can't run a crazy child cult worshipping weird demons if you have tourists around all the time. Yeah. Really would bum you out. And so that was his whole purpose in life. Once again, failed to write it down, but the dog that he has that sadly is destroyed. If
there's too much focus on a dog, it's going to die. That is my theory for any horror film.
Yeah, if that... Warning, the dog dies. Granted, you see the dog you don't bond with this dog a whole lot,
no.
So, not as sad as possible. They could have left the dog longer, and then I would have been ruined. But the dog's name, that actor later on used in a different film as his character's nickname, which was kind of a fun little Easter eggy. Did I write down which movie? You bet I did not. I apologize.
So, yeah, it's a pretty short scene. He just tells them you don't want to go to Gatlin.
And then for some reason, the demon is angry that he told them you don't want to go to Gatlin. Well, this is the part that I think the movie, I didn't quite catch the logic.
Well, okay, so my thought is it's kind of an inkling of the disorder and what's the term? The turbulation that's running under the child civilization. Okay. Because later on, when we're introduced to Isaac and Malachi, Isaac tells Malachi that he was not supposed to have killed him. He was just supposed to observe. Yeah. Because we know that the interlopers are coming. Okay. They're speaking to Isaac through this.
Okay. That makes a little more sense.
Yeah. That's just my interpretation. There's nothing direct that I'm directly saying. This is probably Malachi's first attempt at hey, just that little nudge like we see in serial killers where they have they're giving themselves that little leeway where he just killed that kid. Well, now he's taking that next step and he's like, oh, I did something and on my own without
getting direct told. Yeah, I guess that does make sense because you do. I don't know, there is kind of an arc to Malachi and the amount of stabbing Malachi stabs.
He likes his knife.
He does like his sickle. Very stabbing.
So yeah, so they do get dragged into Gatlin. And we also find out that Job and Sarah were supposed to have been killed, but Isaac says she has the gift of sight. And so that's why they're allowed to live, even though they play with toys, they color.
They're given a lot more luxuries than everyone else in town.
Which, honestly, is... I like this because we start to see that with cults and stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Where the leaders... And we don't see it with the leaders, but the people who are deemed... At least in this movie, the people who are deemed special are the ones who get all the special perks of... modern conveniences, let's say that.
Yeah, like getting to go into their old house. As opposed to living in the cornfield. That part wasn't...
The barn, wherever they're sleeping. But yeah, so they get into Gatlin. It's deserted, which is great too, because all they had to do is, hey, we want to shoot these days and these days. Are you guys okay with shutting down? No one can come out on the streets. The whole town's like, yeah, let's do this. And I think that's a great thing too, because we saw it in Jaws as well, is that once you get the community involved, that's how you really start to like, hey, we're just not this people who are here. We're going to leave. Peace out. They like the whole cast were invited to people's houses for dinner.
Yeah.
And honestly, I think that's got to be one of the weirdest things for some, like these California actors, directors, and producers to be invited into
come have dinner. It's at 7.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. The other thing that really helped with having like an actual town and the town being really involved in it is kind of hard to accurately portray a small town because there is an image of what one should look like. They never look like that. They're never like the nice, cute little square with stuff in
the main street.
Yeah, like
Bentonville, we kind of have some. Well, we have the square.
We have the square. However, I would argue that if there wasn't so much money being thrown at our square, it wouldn't look the way it does.
Yeah.
Because honestly, a square is a terrible, like, civil plan of trying to get people in and out and parking and getting people to walk around and not get squished by cars. You have to close it a bunch of times. So while, you think of a square, this town is a little bit more realistic. It feels correct. Like, it feels like, oh, we got the main road as opposed to a little square. Not
aesthetically, but concept-wise, it makes me think of the Walkplatzes in Germany.
Yeah.
So, like, something like that where automobiles aren't supposed to be.
Yeah.
But there's clearly there's a traffic light, so traffic does go through this area.
Yeah, it's small town. There's only, like, 5 cars happening at any time anyway. So, like, it feels... It gave a better small town vibe by having a real town, which was also really involved in it. So it had all of the amenities they were trying to show. So, like, it had the school, which isn't where directors always put schools.
Yeah.
It's kind of over there somewhere. They've got
It had the public building. It had the shops on Main Street. It had the restaurant that everyone goes to.
Yeah. The library's not this giant building. It's a little teeny tiny library.
Yeah.
Yeah, it felt correct.
Yeah, I agree with that. It was
nice.
And I think that's also just kind of part of it, that they just pick kind of middle of nowhere locations. Like,
yeah, it definitely helped not picking somewhere that was a super developed area and trying to make that look like a small town. Because
even if, like, you go to those small town areas, like, say we go to Rogers. Rogers has that one little area that feels a little like it, but it still doesn't quite have the same vibe because it still had changes over time. You know what feeling I think we're looking at? It's we see it in westerns when they come into town. The lone gunslinger walks in, and there is one street, and that's where all activity happens. Yeah, and if you grew up in a small town like that, or you had grandparents in a town like that, you know that feel, and so when you see it portrayed correctly on a movie theater, it's one less thing for you to go, wait, why are they just running across the square? Why is the school so big? There's only supposed to be like 17 kids in this whole town. Yeah, and I'm sure there's the reverse of that, where people who grow up in like San Francisco or New York or Chicago, they see something in a movie and they're like, that's not happening. Yeah, no, I'm sure it goes both ways. But it definitely does help bring this movie... It has one less thing for you to be thinking about and more room for you to be wondering how this cult kid situation's working. And it serves its purpose as a backdrop. It's not supposed to be this it is a set, but it's not a like fancy set where like the set is part of the story. Cuz I know the church in this set of scenes is actually the interior is actually somewhere else. Yeah. And so when they're leaving the church, they had to be a little creative. Well, they had to build like the railing outside of it to make it look like they were coming out of the church. Because one of them had railing, one of them didn't. Yeah. And it's just basic like gas pipe. Yeah. Yeah. But I don't know. I just like the setting. It is. It's a good setting. It also helps really nicely because the town doesn't feel odd. It feels correct, which helps the children feel more odd because all of the kids
most of the kids are dressed raggedy or a little bit like they tried to dress themselves with hand-me-downs, and then some of them are dressed real odd.
Well,
for the time period.
Well, the other thing, too, I would say time period-wise is, I mean, outside of the car, if you know the make and model...
Yeah, I mean, it's
almost,
a little ambiguous.
It's very ambiguous, and I think that's the great thing about it, because even then, the children, how they're dressed, it feels mid-20th century, so...
I would argue that even some of the, like... what were we calling it? Like, the favorite kids? The ones with...
Job and Sarah.
Yeah, Job and Sarah, and then even, like, Malachi and...
Isaac.
Yeah. Like, their outfits are very specific.
Yes.
Which helps make the discontinuity more... It gives you something more to be like, that's strange.
I think I know what it is. Isaac feels like an old-timey preacher.
Yes, he does. And he dresses like an old-timey preacher.
And Malachi, I think, he kind of dresses just as like a generic farmhand that seems like he'd be a goon.
Yeah, but at the same time, both Isaac and Malachi's clothes have a very homemade feel to them. Yeah. Which, granted, they're definitely still communities who do that, but the town that they're set in doesn't seem to portray that. Yeah. And even some of the other kids, you can see how... a lot of them are just kind of dressed run down and dirty. And then you've got what I like to call the nice children, who are, for the most part, dressed in a, like, recognizable fashion. Yeah. And so, like, because you've got these three distinct styles happening on a very neutral background, it really helps you focus in on, okay, you are weird, and you seem fine, because you at least know how to dress yourself. Yeah, and, But, anyway... Away from that setting and stuff a little bit, the next thing I like about this movie in the, as the plot develops is we're slowly introduced how everything, like, the corn you start seeing, it's absolutely everywhere. Yes. He finds a lot of corn. Yeah, he finds the book that's saying, this person died on this day. Yes. This day, wait, this person's only 18. This person's only 18. This restaurant, the first place they go into, it's like, this was supposed to happen 3 years ago, and the calendar hasn't changed. So they're aware that something's not right in the town. Yeah. And while they're trying to find the information to make a decision, the children find them. Mm-hmm. Well, Vicky finds the kids in their house playing. Yes. And Bert walks in on them on their church service. Yeah. And we see that distinction between the two is like, these kids are playing. Yeah. And Bert gets away, but Vicky's captured. Yeah. And so... Vicky. At this point, too, the kid who played Malachi... Yes. He apparently was really, really rough with Linda Hamilton. He was... I think he was 18. That sounds about right.
And so he has a unique look to him too. And I think they said he purposely put like an underbite to make himself feel a little bit more rednecky, I guess. Yeah, yeah. Backwoods. But she loved it. Like this is right before she started really getting into action movies. Mm. And so she actually she was egging him on, like, be rougher, like, come on.
Like, you're supposed to be kidnapping me.
Yeah, you're supposed to be this big, strong, and overpowering character.
Yeah, like, he is the brute muscle and the hand of the action in this movie. He's the one who makes everything happen.
Come out, interloper. We have your woman. Yes. Like, even just the way he talks, because he's at that age where... you would assume, like, if he was younger, I have your lady, I have your woman. There's something...
Like, you can tell that he's on the cusp of not being a child anymore.
Yeah, there's something primeval about that, too. It's just, like, your woman. Like, when anyone says, my wife, it's that kind of tone.
Well, and at the same time, because of the way he managed to portray that character, and he portrays it the same throughout the whole movie, which really helps, you really do have this, like, sense of fear of this kid. And, like, he's portrayed as a kid, but he's, like, teetering on that cusp of not being a kid anymore. Yeah. Which is part of what makes him feel more dangerous. Because if it's a little kid, you think to yourself, I can eat a kid. Well, I can't eat this Malachi guy.
And I think if you go back, because how we see Isaac, which I didn't realize this. I'm like, oh man, there's something offsetting about Isaac. And
Yes.
part of it is Isaac was 23 in the movie. He has a hormone deficiency disorder. And so he looked like he might be smaller than most of the kids.
Yeah.
But he's...
Well, and the way he managed to deliver his lines, you could tell that there was more purpose and enunciation behind him. Like, everyone else who had lines in this movie did a nice job of, it was clearly a kid or someone who was not deeply educated attempting to say the lines or, exist in this world. Yeah. Whereas everything he says feels thought out and intentional. And not just in the way of like, oh, well, his lines are more well written, but in like a preachery sort of way where like, I've thought through this sermon, I've thought through what I'm going to present to you. Yeah. And like how I'm saying that matters on top of it all. Yeah,
exactly. But yeah, anywho, they take the kids away or the kids take Vicky away, and
Vicky.
Bert is left to hide. He's been stabbed at one point.
Yeah, he gets stabbed at some point.
And
it's not a very pertinent stab, apparently. This is one of those like, you got me.
Just a flesh wound.
Yeah, it's a very much flesh woundy sort of stab. Yeah. Like, it's an inconvenience for a little while, and then I think he kind of forgets about him being stabbed.
Well, they patch it up because, and they're we do have kind of a little bit more of a setting because Job and Sarah are hiding in the cellar, which, by the way, that cellar was also another switcheroo.
Yeah.
The house that they open it up, there's no cellar.
Yeah, there's no cellar there.
So they had to cut to another place. But yeah, they're hiding there, and there's all these supplies and goods because
and it's not
they built it for the commies.
Well, it's not just a cellar, it's a bunker behind their cellar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it's I don't know, we get a little bit more about Job and Sarah.
Yeah.
Just the fact that even though they're special in the community, they still hide, and they're still not safe.
They're not welcome.
And I think that also plays off with the tension between Malachi and Isaac.
Yeah.
Because they do leave, and they go find them in the cornfield. And we learn more that, hey, there was this tension going on. Isaac comes out, and he's like, Malachi... Or we even see it before, where Bert's in the church, and the girl leading the sermon tells him, go get Isaac. No, wait. Go get Malachi. Because we know that there's the start of a clear rift between...
Well, and you can tell that the cult is starting to feel like, Isaac's still our leader, but Malachi gets things done. And you don't want to go to the indecisive one when you've got an intruder. You're going to go to the guy who's going to get things done for you immediately. Yeah,
and that's the other thing is I don't think that Isaac is indecisive. He just is more thoughtful in his process.
And I also think that Isaac's intention throughout the whole movie, everything he does is supposed to have some sort of symbolic reference. Even if it's not necessarily for us to learn, it's more about him and for his cult to follow.
Yeah.
And so when Malachi's starting to call bullshit on him a little bit throughout the whole movie, which is kind of the fun part to watch, because Isaac will say something along the lines of like, no, we're not going to kill her yet, we need to hold off, we need to do them together.
Yeah.
And Malachi will be like, no, one's good enough, why does she need to stay around?
Yeah.
Like, this is silly.
Well... And the fact that he's also upset that Malachi's upset that they didn't kill Job or Sarah.
Yeah.
So that's where the rift, I believe, started.
Oh, for sure. You even get hints of it that it started even before the movie really gets
It's been
going.
Building up, and we're at the head. It's like how children make decisions. There's one kid will be the leader of the group. Oh, we're gonna do this. In the moment one kid says something they don't like. Nope, you're not part of our friends group.
Well, and on top of that, you get little, like, hints in the dialogue where, like, at the beginning, the two nice children, Sarah and her brother, are talking about how, we didn't go to Isaac's sermon that day. We didn't go to his church service in the corn. We don't go to his church service. We're not part of that. And so, like, you get this hint that, like, they've always been the outsiders in their own town this whole time. and it's just been building.
Yeah, or they've been a group of the outsiders of the children.
Yeah.
Because I have a feeling that how kids play games that they don't tell their parents.
Oh, yeah.
This stuff's been going on behind the adults back.
Oh,
They're like,
yeah.
oh, the kids are just playing in the fields, and really they're just like, oh, no, we're going to murder our parents.
Yeah, we're out here murdering things.
And so it's interesting to see how the movie ramps up from here, too, because immediately Malachi takes Isaac and he's going to tell him, hey, no, we're going to sacrifice you too. We're not following you anymore.
Yeah, just get rid of, it's a very quick change of leadership to us, but the way you can see all the other children reacting kind of gives you the hint that, this has been on the verge for a while.
Yeah. And, I don't know. It's interesting because
I do like the, Venom angry speech that Isaac gives while he's hoisted up. It's a really good, passionate, angry, just pure spitfire sort of dialogue, but he does nothing physically about it.
It's the fire and brimstone sermons that we think about, and the great part of that, it was ad-libbed.
Yeah, it is beautifully done. But it's really nicely tied to this entire concept of he's clearly the voice versus the hand, and so he doesn't do anything. He doesn't even really fight back all that hard.
Nope.
He just constantly is spitting venom at them, hoping to be brought down.
It's like trying to use your words instead of using your actions.
Yeah, and I think this movie does a good job of showing, there's these two characters are so polar that, surely at some point they worked together harmoniously, and that's how they got all this done. And now that they're separated, it's all just crumbling.
Yeah. And honestly, it's the best situation for our protagonist because...
Oh, yeah, no, I'm not saying, they should have kept being friends. This works out for the best.
Because Bert's trying to figure out how to get Vicky back, and...
Vicky spends a long time up there, to be honest with you.
Oh, yeah, so does Isaac. And in that time frame... while he's confronting the children, he and Malachi are having a tussle, which apparently that actually got really violent as well between them, because they were throwing each other on the cold, hard ground. And, because, we're talking, this is November.
It gets cold in November. Yeah. It's not soft
Or
dirt.
not November, it's September or something like that. Sometime around then. Anywho,
gotcha.
But the, Isaac gets flung up into the air by... He who walks behind the rose.
Yes. Which, I like this monster. I also don't like this monster.
Okay.
So, let me explain.
Okay.
I like the beginning iteration of this monster. I like the little sneaky scenes of the corn moving by itself against the wind. I even like the scenes where the corn comes alive and is taking things.
Like the corn's breathing.
The corn's moving by itself. I like seeing things rustle through the corn. I liked all of that. So up until this point, I still kind of like the corn demon god. Because right now, it feels like an invisible entity stuck in the cornfield. Yeah. That the children are helping and worshipping. So right now, I like the corn demon god thing. We'll get to later on when I don't like him.
Okay. So what basically happens now is the shift is running from the children to Vicky's down from her corn cross.
Gotta cut Vicky off the cross.
And now they're running from the demon or the entity.
Yes.
And they're trying to figure out how do we defeat it, how do we do X, Y, Z.
Yep, what do we do? How do we get out of here?
And then we find out, there was one adult who tried to rebel kind of thing. The Blue Man.
The Blue Man.
Who we see a little bit earlier when they're taking him off the cross. He was a police officer.
In a classic blue policeman's uniform, thus Blue Man.
And we find out that when he was fighting the children, or fighting the entity, he was preaching from the Bible.
Yes, he was trying to combat it with the Word of God.
While he was also trying to burn the field down.
As one does. Yeah. If you're confronted with demons, your two options really are to preach the gospel at it and to burn it, hopefully simultaneously.
Yes. And fun fact about this part, when they actually do go to burn the field, they were paying this farmer to use it, and I think they were paying more than the government, or what the price of corn was going. And it was at a time when the government was paying farmers not to produce corn.
Oh, yeah.
And so they were getting calls from a bunch of other people saying, hey, want to use our field?
I've got extra corn you can use.
You can burn this field down if you want, as long as you pay me.
I mean, it sounds like a good system to me.
And so, yeah, it's now they're coming up with the plot. They're going to they're going to flood the field with gasoline, and they're going to light it on fire.
And the flood the field with gasoline part, I don't think is a super straightforward thing until they already, like, go ahead and show it in action. Because, like, if you're not familiar with how the mechanism for corn watering works, I don't think you know what they were doing.
Oh, yeah, that's right. They run it through the water system.
They run it through the irrigation hose.
Yeah.
Giant crane. I don't know what they're actually called. I always see them. And so, like, granted, I'll give them this. I love a creative solution in a horror movie. Like, that is one of my favorite things, is when characters and writers in general are very creative with how they're going to solve the problem.
Yeah.
Because otherwise you end up at the end of the movie going, why didn't they just do this? Which a lot of the Jason movies, I think, suffer from that.
Yeah.
Sort of thing.
I gotta go through those at some point.
We'll get to my favorite one, Jason X in Space.
Oh, God.
That one's by far the most creative. But so I really liked this solution to the problem, because while is it realistically accurate? Nah. No. But was it creative? Yes. Yeah. Which I like. I will take that any day. Was the suspense to getting the thing to blow up not that effective? A little bit.
Yeah, and it's kind of a weird transition, because instead of being like, they're still on the run, but it feels like it's a more confined space, because before we have the town, and that might be a good part of it too, though, is because now they're forced to deal with this thing. They can't just run through the town and hide in the town. Yeah. There's this thing actively in the fields that will keep doing what it's doing unless they take it down.
All right. Now to the part where I don't like the monster anymore. Because we are here. We are at the part where I no longer like this monster. So at the beginning, the monster is part of the corn, right? And, like, it's clearly like an entity of the corn. It's also argued to be kind of an invisible beast or entity. Like, you're not given a shape or anything.
But they never specifically mention it either.
Exactly. And then at this point in the movie, it changes into a worm that's crawling around under the ground, which...
Is it, though?
Well, see, they don't say. However, if you've seen Tremors... Yeah. It kind of ruins this monster, because that's all I could think of was, oh, it's a big old worm. Bummer. Which they don't say it is. They don't say that at all.
And so you're just making the jump that's what your mind's imagining.
So it's either a giant worm or it's a giant mole who's really fast at digging.
Well...
Which... Granted, the way they managed to do this effect on a real low budget was pretty cool.
Oh, yeah.
They dug a trench, put a wheelbarrow upside down, they took the wheels off in it, and then put a tarp with dirt over it, and then pulled the wheelbarrow to make it
with a tractor trailer.
Yeah, which is a really clever thing. However, I think I would have liked it more if the beast was either completely less tangible, like it's solely in the corn, it's not in the dirt. Or,
like kind of when Bert's wrapped up in the corn, or like the corn starts directing him towards the children or something.
Like it seems like the entity at this point seems to change from it seems to change beings almost, where it went from being a corn god to a weird mole rat.
And I think that's the other thing. That's I actually like this iteration of it, because you don't see it and it's still left up to your imagination. It makes me think of Lovecraft. Yeah. Where he describes it, but he doesn't at the same time.
Yeah, I guess I mostly wish that I don't even necessarily want to see the creature. I mostly wish that the creature was less reminiscent of other monsters. Yeah. Because the corn part of him is really unique. Like, that's something that only this movie can really pull from.
It's a very American thing, it feels.
Yeah. And then once it moves to underground, it's like, oh, well, it's not in the corn. Yeah. It's a thing, and we're going to blow up that thing.
Yeah. Oh, we did skip over one part. I'm sorry. Oh. I just remembered, before they're deciding to blow up this thing, Isaac comes back.
Oh, yeah.
And he's possessed.
Isaac being possessed was cool. I liked that.
You know how they did that effect?
Yes. Tell me.
The makeup artist stuck raw pork sausage to his face. So that fleshy stuff that's coming off of him. Yeah.
Yeah. Good old pork sausage.
And he says he wants Malachi too.
Yeah.
And that's how Malachi gets down is...
devoured by the corn. And like I liked that part because it did feel more like an old world angry god sort of vibe.
Yeah. No.
Like that was the vibe I was really enjoying out of this monster because especially at the beginning you wouldn't necessarily have known this was a monster flick.
Yeah.
It very much felt just like a weird cult children's thing as opposed to like, oh no, there's actually something that these kids are afraid of. Yeah. And then
okay, so that's one thing I feel the book did, or the short story did a lot better than the movie. The children actually fear this entity.
Yeah, like it's not just them following Isaac.
Yeah, it's not just them doing it because, oh, we want to do this. It's like they almost have to do it because in the, long story short, in the movie, they blow up the creature.
Yeah, in a real terrible explosion.
Yeah.
This is the one part of the movie where you go, oh no.
Yeah.
All of the rest of the effects are pretty good. It's
dated, and I feel if it was redone, I think it would still do really well because how they got the smoke to do that, I think it was the director, he had a friend who was experimenting with film techniques and was dropping ink into water.
Oh, yeah.
And that's how it got the effect. And then they superimposed like some special effects on it.
Yeah.
Which he even mentioned that, yeah, it's dated.
Yeah.
But that's what they had at the time.
Yeah, and so like I do think that, like, yeah, it's not the worst. Like, it's not movie breaking. It's just nowadays we see a explosion and go, no.
Yeah.
Whereas if it, like, had rained... Oh, hi, Charlie. Jeez. If it had, like, sprinkled fire across to the screen and, like, then something had caught fire, like, you still can't see it.
Yeah.
They just didn't have the ability to do that at the time.
Yeah. And, yeah, I mean, that's the thing that's aged it. But back to the children and their relationship to the entity.
Yes.
In the book, Bert and Vicky die.
Yes.
They are both sacrificed, but...
Bert and Vicky be dead.
Vicky is sacrificed, but the thing behind the rose gets Bert. And because of that, he decreases the age from 18 to 17 of the children who have to be offered as sacrifices to him. And so,
it's like you're running out of time sort of situation.
Yeah, so they're having kids at like the moment they can have kids, old timey times of have kids.
Oh, yeah, the cringeworthy.
Which, I mean, is still sustainable, because I was actually thinking about it the other day. I'm like, how the hell is this town sustainable? If you're saying, okay, girl gets pregnant and she has the baby, or she gets pregnant at 16. 16, 17... Or she could get pregnant earlier than that, say 15. Yeah. 15, 16, 17. In her lifetime, she can produce 3 children.
If you were really lucky, yeah.
Yeah, if you had Irish twins.
Yeah. Yeah, and like, I don't know. But there's enough left out of this story, both in the book and also just in the movie in general, that like, it's assumed that these kids have been on their own, self-sufficient for at least 3 years now. Yeah. Well,
I'll get to that in a second. So it ends with Isaac saying, okay, well now 17-year-olds have to... you can't be older than 17.
Yeah.
And so these group of 17-year-olds just walk into the fields, and it ends with this narrative of this pregnant girl who her husband is now walking into the fields, and she hates the entity, but she also is fearful that it knows what she's thinking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like that ending.
I do too, but for this kind of schlocky end,
yeah,
it doesn't fit.
No,
like, it doesn't fit the tone of the movie.
It would have been really strange to put in this version.
And another weird thing about the movie, the dead kid's still in the back of the car the whole movie.
Oh yeah, no, he never leaves. And that's the part that cracks me up, because like the movie is given a nice, fairly happy ending. Like, all right, all the good people in the car, let's get out of Dodge. No, well, except for the kid who's dead in the back seat.
Yeah, well, and even that, like, they're just abandoned, because there's other kids out there.
Oh yeah, no, there's totally other children, and they're just like, nah, suck it, peace.
We're taking Job and Sarah.
The ones who are clearly not brainwashed.
Yeah, or happy birthday present. Because, this is Bert's birthday present. Here.
Oh, yeah, this was supposed to be Bert's birthday. Oh, poor Bert.
Kill giant corn mold. Instant family reward.
Yeah. And then it ends kind of... I will say the ending of this movie is probably its greatest weakness. Because, the monster death scene is a goofy one. And then, it does end on a very weirdly happy note.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, the two children who are left, they're like, well, we can't just leave them. Yeah, we'll take them with us. And then it kind of makes it sound like they're adopting these two random kids that they literally have just met. Which, don't get me wrong, like, yes, adoption is wonderful and you should definitely do that if you can. However, children that you have literally just met, one of whom apparently is, gifted with the vision of sight by a corn demon god, I don't know if this is necessarily a good jump to make.
Oh, yeah.
Well, maybe we should go see someone about this first. Like, also, like, maybe they have grandparents who would be really worried about them.
Actually, it leaves it ambiguous.
It does, which is kind of nice.
And I think that really ties into why this is considered like one of the best adaptations of Stephen King, is because there is so much left up to your imagination.
Oh, yeah, no.
Because Isaac and Malachi don't even make an appearance until the very end of the short story. And even then, I think Isaac has a handful of lines.
Yeah, and I would agree that this version, they did a phenomenal job with the budget they had, the time they had, and the resources they had. And so knowing all of the limitations they have, it makes sense why this version of a Stephen King novel, especially knowing it's a short. Like, if you didn't know it was a short story, you'd be like, there's a lot missing here. I've seen other Stephen King things. The worlds are usually more developed. If you know it's a short story going in, even if you just know that, it does help a lot. Yeah.
And I don't know, it's different. I think part of the reason this one has been so enduring is because it is such it's a fragment of classic Americana. You have a small town, you have it's a farm community. Yeah. There's just something that's ingrained into like the American culture of the Midwest being this homely place. And by turning it on its head, like, people have always been scared of the ocean.
Yeah.
But now you've turned a cornfield into...
And it's not just like, because we've seen other films where, like, getting lost in the corn is the problem, or...
Lost in the woods.
Or, like, a terrifying man in a clown costume is hiding in your cornfield. Like, all of those things are fairly well explained and shown in other movies and other TV shows. The corn itself being the thing feared, but also loved. Yeah. That one was a new one, but also, like, it felt right. It had, like, that folk tale sort of vibe to it. Where you get just enough about everyone's lives and problems so that way they feel real. They feel Paul Bunyan-esque without feeling like you know too much. Yeah. And, I don't know. It's kind of this weird in-between place. Like, I enjoy the movie. It is one of Stephen King's better adaptations from what I've seen. But I don't know. I don't know. Maybe it's something I watched it later in life. Again, maybe it's one of those movies that you need to see younger and be more attached to the area. Yeah, but I also think that this horror movie fills a hole for a specific person. Because you and I have fairly similar taste in horror films. Granted, we do have our differences.
I go way extreme.
And I like the weird, stupid ones.
I mean, yeah, you enjoy those more than I watch them, but they're not like my go-to.
Yeah, I will purposely seek out the real dumb ones.
You'll enjoy Velocipaster.
I am still trying to get my husband to watch it.
Just make him watch it.
I will get to it. I made my way through all the headed shark movies at this point, so we're making progress. But this sort of storytelling, I think, hits home with a lot of people who the story itself being odd and spooky, that resonated more with those sorts of people than any, like, gore or visual horror could. And so I think that's why, for certain people, Children of the Corn is a horror classic. Yeah. Granted, it's not like an overarching, like, oh, everyone is going to be scared of this. It's more of, how do you like your story told? Yeah. And, I mean, I don't know, because it's in a weird subgenre of horror of
killer children.
Yeah.
And not only just killer children, but cult killer children, where there's a handful of these movies. The one I can think of off the top of my head, which is actually really good, is Who Can Kill a Child?
Oh, sure.
And that one is fantastic. Again, based off a short story.
Yeah. The other reason why I think that this one kind of vibes differently than a lot of the other ones, especially that you and I watch, is this one has real strong Goosebumps vibes.
Yeah. No.
This is like an adult Goosebump movie.
Yeah, no, I agree with that, because it's not...
It's not a visual horror, it's a concept horror. Yeah,
because honestly, it is something you probably could show a middle schooler.
Yeah, and like, I've recently gotten into rewatching some of the old Goosebumps stuff.
Oh, joy.
Oh boy. Some of them are much better than others, let me tell you. But the concept behind a lot of them really is something that is spooky and scary. And even adults would probably find scary. It's just the way that it was displayed was, for preteens, by preteens, with terrible writing and terrible dialogue.
It was a shitty drive-in movie.
Yeah, or like on Saturday in the afternoon sort of thing for kids.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with that. Like, that's what their target audience was. And it clearly worked, because millions of us watched it and, like, absolutely loved it to death. But this is like the grown-up version of that.
I just realized something that the director mentioned. You mentioned that Linda Hamilton. This was like this, and like some other people who are tied to this movie were like this kind of was a catalyst to their career.
Oh yeah, this was a big jumping point for a lot of people.
One of the little girls in the cornfield supposedly is the sidekick to Xena, Princess Warrior.
Yeah, she is.
Yeah,
good for her. I love that show.
But yeah, I don't know. It's an interesting. This film has an interesting niche in the horror genre.
Yeah, and I would argue that the reason why it's managed to be part of the like horror classic genres is because it doesn't feel like any of the other classic genres when I think about them. Like, it doesn't match Rosemary's Baby or Nightmare on Elm Street, really.
Yeah.
It doesn't even really match even Friday the 13th or anything like that. However, I think that's because this is a different, like we said, it's a different type of horror.
Well, and I think that's part of the theme of it too, is, as we mentioned previously in our Journey to the Moon episode, it's very much about mob mentality and the perversion of religion.
Yeah.
And unlike movies like The Exorcist or The Omen that caused mass controversy. Yeah. This one had almost no controversy.
Yeah, no, it went pretty well untalked about.
And I think that's part of it too, because we've talked about this outside of the podcast a fair amount of some of the best religious movies are horror films.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I think part of it is this one is kind of a perversion of a religion, whereas like The Exorcist is very much rooted in demonology and exorcism. Rosemary's Baby's loosely based in the Christian version of Satanism, not actual Satanism. And then I'm blanking on another one. Oh, The Omen.
Yeah,
The Omen's another one about the prophecy of the coming of the Antichrist. And so those are deeply tied into those religions. And so I think that's why those cause such controversy and are what's the term? It's they're more
talked about.
More talked about.
The other thing that I think helped this movie a lot become the cult classic is it needed time to develop, not just like on screen and with the writing or anything, but like it needed to exist in the world for enough time for people to digest it and then like sit there and mull with it. This isn't really a movie that you want to see and then just kind of forget that you saw, like a lot of horror movies.
Yeah.
This is definitely one that you want to sit there and kind of think about and like replay certain scenes in your head and like replay certain dialogues or rethink about character designs, which part of the reason why I say this movie got kind of lucky is because critics hated this movie. Critics still hate this movie.
Oh, yeah.
It's at best given a mediocre score.
I mean, horror in general is panned.
Yeah, but I think part of Children of the Corn's being given that time to be thought about was there wasn't like a critic review being like, oh, this movie's amazing, everyone needs to go see it. There wasn't like that rush of like, oh, well, it's going to win an award, or so-and-so said I need to watch it. This was more of a you stumble upon this yourself sort of vibe, which I think helped with it becoming what it is, because even though this movie not necessarily is telling a new story per se, it's telling it in such a way that it gives the audience time to like really think about it and like shift those little nuggets in between their fingers. It's
that in between of the really bad horror film and the really, really good, outstanding, not just critically loved, but like fan loved too.
Yeah, and like this one has elements kind of like how The Shining does, where like, yeah, it's a horror film, but it has stuff for you to sit there and think about, ponder and like take away from the movie.
Yes and no. Shining is a completely different animal. Stanley Kubrick was
completely different type of horror. Yeah. But they both, when you're done watching the movie, you sit there and think to yourself about the metaphors in the story. Yeah. And like the lesson, like there's a lesson to be learned out of this horror movie, which most horror movies, especially nowadays, there's not really a lesson other than don't fuck with witches and don't get possessed.
No, that actually goes back to what's so enduring about good horror films is that it deals with some rudimentary fear. Yeah. Like, and I'm not talking about like, oh, I'm afraid of the dark, so we'll make the dark spooky, or we'll put something in the dark. Yeah. You have to add something that actually has ties to reality. Like the movie that I need in the same genre that I need to get to at some point, The Brood. Oh yeah. It's about having children, and then the children turn out to be monsters.
It's a very much an adult fear, which is like you don't get as many of those in the horror world as you do the like what I like to think of as like child fears, which child fears are like a tangible thing. Like if someone says, "What are you scared of?" and you say spiders, snakes, or
it's like it's the difference between real life horror and campfire stories.
Yes. And this one has campfire elements to it. It's got a monster, it's got, terrifying murder children. Yeah. But it also has those elements that you can sit there and as an adult being like, what if?
Yeah, what if
where is that line?
What if a group of angry 16, 17, and 18-year-olds decide, you know what, we're going to take over this town?
Yeah, or like just even the idea of like, how do you know when you've reached that level in your cult or religion or however you want to think about it? It's got enough different applications for you to think about and mull about, and I think that's where this one stands out.
Because, I mean, we did also mention it has ties to real cults.
Oh, yeah.
Like, not the sacrificing or anything, but like just the organization of it. Yeah, no. And the rifts we see happen and the bloody results that come out. Like, well, we mentioned earlier, Jim Jones. Yeah. What happened with that is there was a division of people wanting to leave, and we already see that starting to happen in Children of the Corn.
Yeah, this is a uniquely horror film. And I honestly wouldn't mind seeing more versions of this horror in modern cinematography.
You know what I want to see? I want to hear a European person's viewpoint on this. Someone who loves horror films to begin with. Oh, sure. But like someone who's not from the US or has this idea of what America's supposed to be. Because
this is a very American ideological movie.
Yeah, exactly. I want to know their opinion of how they would
and also like
perceive it.
Yeah, like I don't know, would this be scary in the same way?
Yeah, it's not like with The Exorcist, where The Exorcist is translatable.
You can totally put that in whatever big city you want, really.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, no, this one is deeply Americana, and that's, I don't know, it has that delightful folk twang to it. Which
so much so that it has a historian, John Sullivan.
It does have a historian, bless him. So if you like this movie, I do recommend getting the new version. Thankfully, you have the new release of it.
Okay, not the new release, the Arrow collector's edition.
It has some really great director,
actor,
the
producer,
historian, everyone.
Yeah, it's got everything. It also has our commentary by horror film historian, which is key because it's a very niche.
It's very niche. However, with all that said, Nico, what are your thoughts and feelings about this movie? How do you rate this?
I would it's one of those movies where if I had family over, put a projector outside,
yeah,
sit out in lawn chairs, and just watch it against the background of a barn or house.
Yeah.
I think that's
it's a good drive-in.
It's
feel.
a good set. Yeah, exactly. And that's where I think this movie sits, is if you're in the mood for, I'm not going to say it's schlocky because
it has its moments, but it's not really.
Yeah, it's not Killer Clowns from Outer Space schlocky.
No, not quite that bad.
But yeah, I honestly, if you love horror, it's worth a watch.
Definitely.
Just because of how iconic it is. I would say it put Midwest on the map for horror.
Oh, yeah.
As they mentioned, it's the Jaws of the Midwest.
Yeah, and like, it also wasn't in Texas, which was really nice. Because a lot of Midwestern, and I say that in air quotes, Midwestern horrors kind of, just in general, have all been based in Texas, which makes sense.
Texas or New Mexico, the Southwest.
Yeah, because, makes sense. There's a lot of lore in that area to build off of. The middle and upper Midwest, the little...
Corn country.
Yeah, there's not as much going on up here.
Yeah, but what would you rate it, Chris?
I think this is, like you said, this is a really good one for a summer night sort of horror thing. This would be a good one to take, like, if you're one of those glampers like I am, this would be a good one to take with you glamping to watch, in the evening once it starts getting dark. I also think this is a good horror film for if you've got that group of friends where you've decided we're watching a horror film. And you've got like one or two people who are like, I don't really want to watch, like, I don't like horror.
Yeah.
This is a nice, easy horror one where no one's going to have nightmares from this movie.
Something we could get Erica to watch.
Easily. Without even any real, like, trouble or fuss or anything. Like, this is a really good, just thought-provoking movie that happens to be horror.
It's not Gozu where you should have had headphones in.
Should have had headphones in for that one. I apologize. No, this is very much like a good, like, anybody could get through this movie without any real issues sort of movie. With that said, again, if you haven't seen this movie and you're into horror, this is... it's a classic. Watch it at least once. Is it going to be in your repertoire for every Halloween or every summer? Probably no. It might end up in our family, though, because apparently my husband loves it.
Hey, you're getting him into horror movies he likes. We have a start.
We have a start, which helps, because if you do really like this movie, the last I heard, they were making a prequel. It was being filmed right now in Australia. But they got stuck because of, the virus.
Yeah.
So when will that be released? Not sure yet, but that was the last I heard of the prequel to this whole thing.
See, I actually, for this review, because I haven't seen anything past the original Children of the Corn.
Yeah.
I'll get to it at some point.
Oh, same.
Maybe for one of the chiller reviews I've been doing. I wanted to review this movie as is and not the legacy, because... Fair. Oh god, it went on to spawn so much other stuff, and no one from the original cast was approached.
If you're like me and you like shitty like continuations of things, that's where the Children of the Corn sequels kind of head off into, is just random ass territory, very Jason-esque, where you're like, where are we now? What are we doing? Why is this? Who are you? What are we doing here?
I'm not looking forward to Friday the 13th.
It's my favorite. I love how it starts off real strong, it gets even stronger, and then it just kind of falls into the deep end of a lake.
See, I've seen like the first 4.
That's all you need.
Well, okay, so I've heard the opposite from my buddy Sugi.
Well, if you like shitty ones like I do, then you need to skip right to the end.
Well, like the first 4 are like, the first one's good, but then like up till 5 is boring as shit. Which I think I got to 4, and I'm like, this is the same shit. I'm not continuing
it
this.
is the same. And then they just start getting real weird.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of how the Children of the Corn franchise goes. But I have faith in the prequel, because I think a prequel makes more sense than a sequel.
Yeah, and we're in a golden age of people taking horror films seriously.
And I have faith in Australia.
Yeah, they've had some pretty good horror films, so...
Hey, Charlie. But. Yeah, so, maybe in the near future we will see a prequel.
Who knows?
I don't know, holding my breath.
Anywho, this has been The Good, the Bad, and the Weird.
Thanks for listening.
May the corn be with us all.
Amen.
Peace.
Is that so?